Hi, just to answer the questions that Barry put to me to explain what I wrote in my email following our camp. This is a sun salutation, comes from Ashtanga Yoga. Most kinds of yoga have something very similar. This is just the specific Ashtanga one. Always engaging lightly through the belly upwards and inwards, like a toothpaste tube, trying to pull all the toothpaste up to here, and the pelvic floor lightly engaged as well. And breathing long and steady, about 3 seconds in and 3 seconds out on every inhale and exhale. And the movements will match the breath. So starting with an inhale. Excuse me, so 5 breaths here. Because we're not moving, there's more chance to concentrate again on the belly and the pelvic floor and the breath. And bend the knees on the 5th exhale and inhaling on the step and on the extension. Exhale down. Inhale up. Being young athletes, they could jump forwards and backwards, which will look like this. And then 5 long steady breaths here. I'll just skip that bit. So bending and jumping on the inhale and extending at the end of the inhale, sorry. Exhale down, inhale up, and exhale, hands to your sides. So that's got elements of a few of the other things that I've been asked to explain further. So your serratus muscle, anterior, is like the zigzag muscle here. I call it the Bruce Lee muscle sometimes. You can see it like this zigzag here. But it actually comes right around under the shoulder blade and sort of becomes the rhomboids or joins to the rhomboids, depending on how you look at it. It's like the major core of the shoulder. So you've got shoulder blades, serratus anterior, rib cage. So your rotator cuff is not really meant to be the true holding things together core of your shoulder. It's like the guiding the movement part of the core of your shoulder. But if serratus goes to sleep, which is very common, all of a sudden the rotator cuff has to do the stabilizing work, and then it can't do its guiding work because it's too busy stabilizing, and then problems occur from that overuse, from all those conflicting and competing demands on those small muscles, right? Serratus is a very strange muscle. It does protraction of the shoulders, so it does that push away from the floor. See, I'm not bending my elbows, it's a shoulder movement. So my shoulder blades are close together on my back, and then when I push away with serratus here, it pushes my shoulder blade wider and flush onto my rib cage, and all of a sudden now you got a stable shoulder to swim from. What I like to do to engage it, it is involved in this yoga, down dog, because if it's not, then you sag down like that, and you'll be overstraining the capsule of the joint the entire time you're in that posture. So pushing away like I was just doing, to protract the shoulders on a bit of an angled plane. It does work on that plane. Your serratus has kind of got fibers that run in a fan under your armpit there. But the best way to switch it on, I find, it's a little fiddly, but it's hands and knees Make sure the athlete can do that push away and then keep that height as they move their hands about a hand's length forward. So now the heel of my hand is where the fingers were before. Bend the elbows, turn them towards each other a bit. Make sure they haven't sagged down like that. Push away, and now I'm pushing that way as if I'm trying to slide my hands away on the floor. And your knees automatically push back just enough to keep you from moving in space. So I've got this upwards push, inwards twist, forwards push, and the knees push backwards. And with practice, you can start to feel that that push is coming from the middle upper back, which sounds a little strange at the moment. But with practice and finesse and subtlety, because if you go too hard, it's these other normal muscles that like to do all the work will take over. So you almost have to imagine, yes, your hands are on the floor, but it's actually this bottom corner of your shoulder blade that you're pushing that way. And the hand only moves on the floor because of the origin of the movement back here. Now, it's all a bit fiddly, but the long and short of it is that serratus, if we can engage it, it will become the core of the shoulder again, and the other smaller muscles won't have to do as much work, and they can go back to what they're designed to do. Another way to do it, which is less fiddly, is to get, could be a dumbbell, could be anything, a weight, right? And hold it on the sternum. And I could be standing, but I wouldn't be in the picture, so I'll just go here just now. You're going to inhale, pull up through those toothpaste tube muscles, and then drive straight up over the sternum, not back over your head, but just over where it started, and then pull straight back down. Pause, reset your core muscles, and again drive up and pull down. Now, me being upright, pushing that way, means I'm pushing in the same direction as if I'm on hands and knees, pushing that way. So it can be a lot easier to figure this out, but it's still a bit fiddly. But I'm always available for discussion on Zoom or whatever you want. The psoas is about as big as your fist and forearm. And it runs, if that's my belly button, it runs from L1 right down through to somewhere at the top of my femur, in around the head of the hip. It's the only muscle that directly joins the femur to your spine. So it's a bit like the serratus and the lats of this joint. It's the psoas and the glutes are what bind together down here at this joint and create the movement and good transitions of force or transference of force. I don't know, I see a lot of psoas stuff online because of what I've searched for in the past, but it's all mostly to do with stretching it, but it's very hard to stretch because of where it is. I've known how to release tension with fingers for a long time, and I've done it, but I've come to realize that a quick few minutes of releasing a psoas versus a week of sitting to drive, eat, work, sleeping curled up, like this psoas doesn't have a chance, right? It's almost just a waste of the client's money to keep coming back to have that psoas released if they're just going to keep curling it up 20 hours a day, right? So it's also, you may have experienced this, it's a really painful massage or release to have that done. So what I do is I just get people to lie down with their feet about shoulder width apart. You stick your fingers in on the groove of the side of your six-pack. Inhale, pull up through the belly and the pelvic floor. Grip your glutes, like squeeze your glutes as if you're trying to rotate your legs out the way in the hip joint. And add a very slight lift of both your legs. Very slight. You can see I haven't really lifted them. My heels are touching, my calves are still touching. My hamstrings are kind of off the ground. Not because I planned it that way, but that's how it's expressing itself today, right? If I went stronger, so I've already felt okay, I'll relax it for a second, and that's all soft, right? As I go to lift the legs, or send the signal to begin the lift of the legs, you might see it, I don't know, my fingers get pushed out by the swelling of the psoas. So it's not your abs what you're feeling if you're doing this, it's the psoas underneath. And then there's a lot going on. We've got the pelvic floor pulling up, we've got the toothpaste tube muscles pulling up around the corset of the core. You're squeezing your glutes, you're not quite lifting your legs, and you're breathing all at the same time. So it's a bit like learning the scales on a piano. You're going to lose the psoas, you're going to lose the breath, you're going to lose the pelvic floor. That's a good example. As you lose the pelvic floor, you start to try, oh, whoops, it's gone. You try and fix it, and as you try and fix it, you stop breathing because you can't maintain all these things all at the same time. So just basically, it's a 1 minute engaged, 5 seconds completely switch everything off. Do that 3 times. And there you've got 180 seconds of your brain going, wow, I thought my psoas was this long, but it seems that it can actually do stuff in that position too when it's this long. So it's about engaging the muscle at its full length instead of it being this long like it spends most of its life in almost all of us. Now, that subtlety of not quite lifting is the same thing as we're going to use in the Superman. Let's take that off. There's nothing wrong with a Superman, especially with swimmers. They've got to have that ability to hold the form in the water. But, you know, wherever your arms are going to be for the lift, if you go really big, then the tiny muscles between every segment of the spine, they're like, oh, we'd love to do that. Oh, but the big muscles that go from here to here have done it already, so I'll just go back to sleep. So if we do very similar to what we just did, it's like a 5% effort Superman. So belly pulls up, pelvic floor pulls up, and this tiny lift where the skin of my nose is still touching, but it's not being squashed. Same with my forearms. They're not heavy on the floor, but my skin's touching on the sides of my hands and on the sides of my forearms. So it's easy to move. And my legs are the same. I've lifted them just enough that they feel like they're just about ready to lift, but don't lift, right? If we do that very subtle lift, the big muscles don't kick in, and the tiny muscles actually get a chance to do what they're designed to do. Giving you segmental stability, which a bit like what I talked about with the rotator cuff. If you've got small scale stability, it's easier then to have stability over 2 segments, 3 segments. All these other muscles get to kick in and or do what they're actually designed to do because they're not trying to do each other's jobs. So we've managed to reinvigorate the tiny muscles that are like this big in between all the knobbly bits of the spine. I think there's one more thing. There was some further, there's 2 things actually. There was the elastic exercises that we did. As with any elastic exercise, you have to make a compromise because of the change in tension as you go. So we did 2 exercises. One of them, it's all about getting all the body parts moving at the same time and teaching that nervous system how to coordinate all of that. So we've gone from like an L-shaped kind of karate kind of a stance here, and we're going to push off that back foot, twist and push with that working hand. But this hand as well, the spare hand, is pulling back as if there's an elastic in it coming off there as well. So we don't want to have a floppy right hand because then the rib cage isn't stable. or able to rotate fully. So bring it on back, reset the belly, engage the toothpaste muscles and the pelvic floor as well at the back at the end of each rep, and then so that's set, and then push, twist, finish, and pull with this other hand, and then control it back. So the compromise I mentioned is, of course, back here it's a little bit loose, although I seem to have got a pretty decent position here. Obviously, when you're in a hurry in a half-hour session with 12 kids, it's hard to make sure everybody knows what's going on there. So I've managed to get quite a decent tension, although it is quite tight at the front here as well, and then you control it back. So I've got, over here, I've got 13 cable machines in that other room, which mean that you've got a stable, steady load. It doesn't change all the way through. So that's obviously better, but it doesn't really happen next to a swimming pool, so this is your best option. And then we did the exact opposite, where I've got my left foot forwards, my right hand holding. I've come to the front of that movement. This hand is doing the opposite. Inhale and engage the muscles, and then push back with that left foot, twist and pull. And it's kind of like drawing a bow kind of position. The elbow is in line, the forearm is exactly in line with the elastic. And then we let it pull you back. And it's a little bit loose there. Inhale again. Engage your belly, and then drive, pull, twist, finish in that elbow in line all the way back here. You can't quite see it, I don't think, on that shot. So there, and forwards again. Just all about coordination, which is often lacking in teens, I find. Now, I had the group split into two, so we only had 6 elastics set up, so some folk were doing that. Other people were doing a few standing postures from the kind of yoga I practice and teach. So what did we do? I think we did the triangle. So leg length apart, this foot points along the mat, this one's turned in slightly. I pop my hip, the first time you do it anyway, it's helpful to sort of pull your hip away from this other finger, reach long, slide down, and today I think that's as far as I'm going. Holding onto the ankle, right, and looking up at the top hand. I'm in a plane here, imagining I'm wanting to take us, if I was up here looking down, I would just want to see Harry in a straight line. I don't want the bum sticking out and the head over here. We want bum forwards, head back over the foot. And breathing calmly. Now, one of the things that defines yoga, this is quite a big hamstring stretch, right, on this leg. And I've written about this in my return document to Barry as well. You'll be able to see that. But there's additional, instead of just like, I'll stretch my hamstring and fall asleep there, right? What's happening is, yes, I'm stretching it very similarly, although there is a bit of a twist going on because of where my pelvis is sitting. I'm not looking at the ground, so I'm having to keep my brain switched on with proprioception to know where I am in space. And then additionally, we can actually, whether you're gripping onto your big toe, which is where we're trying to get to, not feeling that today, but even if they're only gripping onto their ankle, instead of just thinking, okay, now it's a downwards movement and we've got hold of the ankle, great. Actually, what you're going to do is grab the ankle and switch on the muscles that would lift you right back up again, but you don't move because you're gripping. So it's an isometric contraction. And you very lightly engage the muscles that would lift you up. And you continue to breathe and engage your belly. Same toothpaste tube idea, pulling the belly up towards sort of the back of the neck. Breathing calmly, engaging that lift. So now my hamstring is at full stretch, but I'm also engaging it. So instead of just flopping into it, we're learning how to engage the muscle at its end of range, which is what increases the range over time. Same thing on the other side, of course. And then to try and get their shoulders worked into it more, going to interlace the fingers down near the tailbone, like that. Parallel feet, about leg length apart. Inhale and lengthen through your belly. Oh, running out of battery on the phone, hang on. All right, I don't know what happened there while I was doing that, but I was running out of battery, but hopefully we're going to be all right to get to the end. We're not done a far to go. We got those interlinked fingers. Inhale, lengthen your belly. As you exhale, fold at the hips. And then trying to lift the hands off the back. Some people won't leave the back. Mine point up to the ceiling. My wife, her shoulders will be here and her arms all the way along the floor. So that's not abnormal. But yeah, we're trying to fold the belly through the legs and take the hands over wherever they get to, whether it's pointing up or pointing flat or pointing slightly down. Any one of these, like the one before, the triangle, once you get into it, 5 long breaths. Remember I said at the start, inhale for 3 seconds, exhale for 3 seconds. So that's 30 seconds per side, per posture. So grab the ankle, 30 seconds, long breaths, same on the other side, same here. Long, steady, calming breaths with the belly drawing up. I did mention, this will be more to do with the adversity that I mentioned in the email. So towards the end of our session, we looked at some sitting yoga postures. I was thinking shoulders would be a good place to go. First of all, we did sort of standard, that foot flat on the inner thigh. Take hold of the front toe, which is usually easier on one leg than 2. Some folk might be struggling to get hold of the feet with 2 straight legs, but even teenagers. And once they get to here, it's easier to get to one toe. We're trying to keep that low and breathe and pull up on the toe to help get you up and forwards. 5 long deep breaths on both sides. And then the really good one I thought for them was the shouldery one, where this foot is flat. There's like a whole handspan between the foot and the leg. Inhale. As they exhale, they reach forwards. Turn the whole arm down. Tuck the knee into the armpit. I'll turn sideways so you can see. I'll turn right round so the hands, I think most athletes got here eventually, some with a bit of assistance, but I'm pushing my knee that way, which is sort of tractioning on my shoulder. None of this is very hard. I'm not trying to wrench it out of its socket. I'm just trying to apply forces in all directions to see how that affects my balance and ability to get my face towards my front leg. And the adversity thing I was mentioning was, this gets quite like, holy hell, what am I doing? If you can't stay calm, then you're like, and your brain's like, I'm not going to relax into this posture because Harry's freaking out, right? So all the sort of detailed parts of yoga, which are when do you breathe, how do you breathe, where are you looking, it's all about shutting out distractions. There's actually, you would have heard me breathing before, and it sounded a bit weird today, but it's meant to sound a bit like Darth Vader. And that does several things. It heats the air as it comes into your body. It helps you regulate the length of the breath so that it matches to the movement, some of which are short and some of which are long. But it also sort of creates a noise that shuts out other noises. So we're always trying to reduce distractions and increase focus into what we're doing. So the adversity thing is teaching them, like, you're in this thing and your shoulder is under all sorts of stress. And yes, you've never done it before, so that adds to it. But how calm can you stay in this situation that's a little tricky to you, but under control. And I just think that translates really well to coming down the final stretch in the pool and your competitor's an arm's length ahead of you. As you know, all you can do is focus on what you're doing. You can't affect your competitor. So that ability to just shut everything out and just perform exactly what's required of you to do your best and ignore what's happening over here. You can't control that. So I remember talking to our president here, Anita, about the kids who were expressing they were a little sad because they weren't winning medals at local meets, and she wanted us to do a session about teaching them how that's not always what it's all about, and if you perform to your best, then the whole deal, right? So we sort of weaved that into our yoga sessions, and I find this final thing that we did to be one of the hardest for everyone of every age. Lying down in, if you look at a muscle man poster, it's anatomical position. That's basically how we lie down as well. And get them to breathe. Now, when they're surrounded by their friends and teammates, it's awfully tempting to poke each other or make a farting noise or whatever makes them laugh at that, whatever it is. So it's trying to convince them that this is one of the hardest things, is to lie here undisturbed by anything that's going on around you. Just as expected, it was as hard for them as it is for people with jobs and everything else, right? They struggle too. We all struggle. So aside from that, the mental side of lying down here, I find it with regular yoga practice, your brain starts to, it's almost like it's a feedback process. You lie down on this flat surface in the same position each time after yoga, and your brain, your nervous system starts taking in feedback from how your body is touching the floor. So this is a process over months, and it's not that yoga is their main new thing now, so it may never get to that point, but allowing the brain, the nervous system to absorb and rewire and be like, I remember when I started yoga, I could have put my head through this gap under my lumbar spine probably. That's how it felt. And over 12 weeks, it'd be like, that's actually getting flatter and flatter and flatter. And my hamstring's on the ground. I didn't realize it wasn't. So that's all part of the brain rewiring its perception of where your body is in space. And like I've mentioned in